Why lead generation for contractors is getting harder. To illustrate why I think it's getting harder, I'm just going to tell the story of my remodeling company. So back in, I think it was like 2011, my stepmom built our company a website. She built it on HTML. It looked super ugly, but at the time it was state of the art. And as soon as she built that thing, we just started getting tons of leads and tons of customers. And for many years, it was like 2 or 3 years, like that thing just fueled our whole business. We didn't have to do anything else, no advertising. We never even looked at the website. It just brought in consistent phone calls, consistent leads. But after 2 or 3 years, like the number of calls coming in started to dwindle. And we didn't care that much at first because we were so busy. But at a certain point, like the leads were just over with. They were done. We weren't getting anything. And we had no idea why. It wasn't until I went online to Google and did a Google search for contractor near me that I discovered that the reason why is that in the beginning, we were like the only contractor in our area that had a website. This was like 2011. Like there weren't that many contractors online. And so as consumers started going online more, we were the only one they were finding. So we got a head start on everybody, and it was kind of a lucky thing. But after a few years, our competitors had caught on, and we had dozens of competitors who had built websites since we had built ours, and theirs were much better than ours. And they just overtook us. You know, where we were number 1 on Google, a few years later, we were number 20. Like nobody ever saw us. That was when I discovered like how powerful being seen on Google is, and why we started kicking ourselves for not paying attention to this sooner. This is the same thing that's been happening ever since then. It's 2024 now, so that was almost 15 years ago. More and more contractors go online every day. More and more contractors start advertising on Google, on Facebook. They start buying leads from Angie, from Yelp. More and more contractors are catching on, and it's pretty much common knowledge now. Like one of the main ways that you'll get leads and customers is the internet. And on the internet, you've got Facebook and Google. Those are the main 2 things. And it's not hard to know this now, because as soon as you go online and ask Google or ChatGPT or anything, like how do you get more customers for a construction business, you see all the same stuff. There's only like a handful of things to do now. And so 10 years ago, all the consumers already knew that the internet is where you want to be, and that's where everybody goes to find stuff. But here we are 10 years later, and all the contractors are figuring that out. But the consumers figured that out a decade ago. My point is that more and more contractors every day are competing for the same number of leads that there were 10 years ago. There's not a lot more homeowners now than there were before. There's just not a lot more leads going around than there were before. But there's a lot more contractors going after those same leads. So it's supply and demand. So what that means is if you're one of the contractors swimming around trying to get these leads, you're competing with so many more people than you were 10 years ago that it's a lot harder to catch them. And it's a lot more expensive to play the game. And if you're in any kind of populated market, you're going to be competing against some companies who are really good at this now. That's the state that we're in. It gets harder every year, and it doesn't stop. It keeps getting harder, and it's because of supply and demand. There's more and more contractors going after the same amount of leads. And it's super important to understand this as a business person, because you need to understand like what you're going into. When I was just starting this marketing stuff 7 years ago, I thought there was just an endless supply of leads. I thought if you just figured it out, you could just go out and buy or get as many leads as you wanted. But that's just not the case. And I'm a little embarrassed for thinking that it was, but that's what I thought. And that's what a lot of people think. The fact is that there's just a finite of business to go around. And so you have to be more competitive to get it. So I'm painting a pretty bleak picture, but there is a positive thing. And that is that there is still a way to compete. And the way that we do it is using Google Maps organically. Organically meaning we're not paying for advertising. And we do this by really honing in on our local market, because Google Maps works off of proximity. Like people will find you on Google and Google Maps if they're close to you. And so while there's tons of contractors out there who live in highly populated areas, and when they sign up for Google Maps, they say, oh, we cover this whole metropolitan area. But what they're doing is it's causing them to compete with like 1,000 different businesses, and they just get demolished. They get nothing. What they need to do, and what we do, is we hyper focus our area that we target on like our neighborhood, on like a 1 or 2 mile radius around us. And what that does, like if you go to Google Maps and you type in remodeling contractor near me, it's gonna come up, it's gonna show you a big map of your area, and there's going to be a whole list of contractors. But what you do is you zoom in on your neighborhood and you see how many contractors are showing up, and hopefully it's like 5. And now you're looking at a service area that's small enough that you can actually compete in. And for most contractors out there, if you could just become the go-to contractor in your neighborhood, you would be crushing it. You'd have a lot more customers than you do now. You wouldn't be driving all over the city. And that's what's possible for you. You can become the go-to contractor in your neighborhood. You can't become the go-to contractor in Los Angeles. Like, it's just, those days are over. That market is so saturated and so full of strong contenders. New people going into that market have no chance unless they hyper focus on the neighborhood and the area around them. Now, if you're a rural contractor, and I say rural loosely, I would consider myself a rural contractor, and I've got like 50,000 people in my city. But when I say rural, I mean it's just less competitive. If you're kind of out in the boonies, or you're outside of town, even a major metro, your service area can probably be much larger, because it's not about the size of the area, it's about the number of other companies you're competing with. And so when you're choosing your service area on Google Maps, on your Google business listing, you want to choose an area that has as few competitors as possible, and ideally you'll be the top contender mainly by reviews. If you're competing with 5 other contractors in your neighborhood and you have more reviews than all of them, then you can become the go-to contractor in your neighborhood and start to pick up some momentum and start to get somewhere. But like our philosophy goes, if you can't win in your neighborhood, you are absolutely never going to win across town. So win in your neighborhood first before you try to expand out and cover a bigger area. Again, this is organic. I'm not talking about paid advertising, because when you're doing paid advertising, you can't get away from competing with more people and with the top people. But organically, you can limit your competition and win more by targeting a smaller area around yourself.